think we've all been at a place at some point in our lives where we feel that, hey, there's actually no escape. There's no solution. The walls are caving in. I love the lyrics here that say, hey, it isn't in our blood. It's not in our blood. And that's what this community is about, because we believe there's some other blood that changes everything for us. And over this whole series that we're going to focus on the underground, I just love the song we just sang earlier, because it just speaks about, hey, God pursues us relentlessly, despite most of the time when we've actually done something and it feels like the walls are caving in, because most of the time, and not all the time, but the walls are caving in because we've actually done something, we've actually messed up, we've actually sinned against God. So today, as we embark upon the next 4 weeks of the series on the underground, I hope and pray we can actually be really honest with ourselves, that actually we can strip away the veneer, that we can actually open and sort of dissect our heart a bit, and that we can come into this space and really wrestle with, hey, the question of how are you doing? How are you going? Like, really? Like, how are each and every one of us going? Like, if we had to sort of remove the makeup this morning that we've put on, and we had to take a deep look inside of us, how are we really going? And that's what we want to ask the next couple weeks. And I believe this question's an important one, but I believe we don't take the time to actually answer it. We answer it very superficial, and maybe we portray that actually the answer of this is, I'm fine. You know, everything's good. Week's been great. Everything's good. Had a great week. But actually, how are you emotionally? How are you doing emotionally? How are you doing spiritually? How are you doing financially? How are you doing relationally? How are you doing? How are you? And the best way to answer this question, I guess, for ourselves is actually just to think back on your last crisis that you've had in your life. And then you could answer this and see actually how you're doing. How are you really doing? How's it going on the underground? How's it going on the inside? So last weekend, did you guys enjoy Equippers, having them here? Straight after Equippers, I had a great weekend because I was lucky enough to go to Sydney and visit my brother for one evening and all the nephews, and then for another 2 evenings to go and visit, some of you might know Norman and Liz. And little did we know that it was actually actually I did know, but it was their daughter's first birthday, all right? And we thought we were just coming to, be a part of the party, but actually Zalia and I were actually thrown into actually the event coordinators, all right? Ever gone to visit some friends and all of a sudden they just throw you in the deep end, hey, can you just do this and this and this and this? And anyway, we arrived and we loved it. It was a great weekend, and many kids came to the party. We did all the setup. Here's some photos, and her name's Ava. She's 1 year old. Isn't she cute? And that's Norman and his family, Ava. And this was Zalia over here on the veranda, or I don't know, you were designated to do all the games as well, right? One of the games that Zalia did was she heard there were heaps of kids coming, so it was pass the parcel around. And so she wrapped chocolates up in every single layer, right? And there were about 30 or so chocolates, and I think there were only about 7 kids who played the game. So I could just see all the parents like freaking out. But again, this weekend helped me realize, wow, I've got so much respect for parents, really. Like, I don't know how they do it. Like, I don't know how they would have done that party without us. And we're not that great, but like they would have never, because They have to have Ava everywhere, and Noah and all the other kids are just tearing the place to pieces. But one of the things I was doing is I got designated, hey, could you just clean what do you call this? Like a veranda or a patio? Okay. So I was designated to clean the patio, and I was busy actually sweeping it and then actually washing it. And Norm came out and he said, oh, thanks so much for helping, guys. We really appreciate it. And we're so sorry that you guys have come all the way and, you're doing all the work. And we said, no, that's fine. And I said, man, I'm just struggling to get all these worms off the patio. And he said, what worms? I said, nah, you got to be kidding me. There's like hundreds of worms on this patio over here. He said, I've never, ever seen them before. I said, Norm, look at them. They're all dried out, and they've obviously been here for ages. And literally, I spent, I don't know, maybe a half an hour or so just trying to scrub them off. And I thought about it, and I thought, man, that's interesting that he had never noticed these worms, even though he said, hey, I come out here every single day. I walk on this patio, and I've never seen those worms. And I think it's very similar to the way we answer that question, how are you going, is that maybe we don't actually see the worms that are actually inside of us. And we sense that actually, hey, there's nothing there, but actually everyone else sees it. Like it's just in bold capital letters. Everyone else can see what's happening in the underground. So today I want to share with you guys this short story about a guy. I know Volta spoke about this guy a couple of weeks ago, and his name was David. And I feel David's story, if you haven't heard it before, is a story where he's a guy who has a lot going on the inside. All right, he's got this happy painted face on the outside, but he's got these worms that are literally breeding on the inside. And for some of you, you obviously have heard David and Goliath, right? Have we heard that story? Yeah. So the part where I want to pick up the story of David is a bit later on in his life. And he's probably, I'm not exactly sure, but probably in his 50s. He's already defeated Goliath. God actually called David and said, hey, you are going to be the king, all right? When he was a young boy and everyone overlooked him, he had other brothers, he was overlooked, and God said, hey, actually, I'm choosing you to be the king of Israel. And David became the king of Israel, and at this time, we pick up the story where David is actually leading the nation of Israel as the king. And we're going to read through the story. So let's go. All right. In the spring at the time, when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. All right. I'm going to read quite a bit of text today, but I think this is the only way we're really going to get into the story. And the story starts off with David is, what does it say? What's the first sentence that it says there? In the spring and at the time when kings go off to war, all right? Who was the king? David, all right? And over here, what does it says? But David, where was he? He remained in Jerusalem, all right? So David's actually at home chilling while all his armies are actually out in war. And we're not exactly sure why that is. Maybe it is because he was old, but as it was a custom, they say, it was that the kings actually went out to war as well. David isn't at war at this time. Have you ever been at a place where you know you shouldn't be at because you know, man, it's just not the place you should be. There's just something that could happen. You're nearing the edge, and you still stick around. David over here knew probably that he should have been at war, but he remained at home. The story goes on. It says, then one evening David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. From the roof he saw a woman bathing the woman was very beautiful. And David sent someone to find out about her. The man said, she is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Here David finds himself walking outside on his palace, and a beautiful woman catches his eye. And David, has the opportunity to look at her and to decide, hey, I'm going to go and walk back into my palace. But David is intrigued by her beauty. And David then, he wants to know, hey, who is this? Who is this lady? And so a messenger goes out, and the messenger comes back. And I love this part of this verse, because it says, she is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the what? The wife of Uriah the Hittite. Now, all of us in this room will probably, as soon as we hear that, we'll say, okay, I'm going back to bed, going to go and sleep, right? David doesn't decide to go back to sleep, all right? He decides to do this. He says, then David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. Then she went back home. Yeah, David, the king, all right? I mean, whatever he says goes, all right? He sends the messenger out, and he goes and he pursues Bathsheba. She comes back. We're not sure if he forced himself on her, or if, he's the king, so she actually just had to, I guess, sleep with him. And then she goes back home. Is there anything inside of you that sits and thinks like, man, this isn't right? At times I feel that there's times in our lives where we know that, man, this isn't right, but there's something else that is pursuing us, and actually, like, just, man, this could be good. This could be great. This looks beautiful. So the story goes on then. The woman conceived and sent word to David saying, oh no, I am pregnant. Yeah, David, he thought, man, that was good, but now he finds himself in a bit of a predicament, because now he realizes that Bathsheba, who is the wife of who? Uriah, right? Is now pregnant. And Uriah is actually one of his good mates who's actually at war at this point in time. So from a small little gaze on the palace, just looking out the window and seeing Bathsheba, to the point where actually David has himself in a bit of a predicament where he's realizing, hey, freak, what am I going to do? So this is what he does. So David sent this word to Joab. He said, send me Uriah the Hittite. And Joab sent him to David. So he calls out to him. He's fighting in the war. He says, hey, I want Uriah to come back, all right? And probably we're all thinking, yes, David, what a man. What a great man of character, all right? He's going to just lay it out. He's going to go to Uriah, and he's just going to say, hey, I'm so sorry for what I've done. It was a miserable mistake. I do apologize. But probably like most of us, when Uriah came to him, David asked him how Joab was, how the soldiers were, and how the war was going. Next up, he says, then David said to Uriah, go down to your house and wash your feet. So Uriah left the palace, and a gift from the king was sent after him. I love that part in this story, because I think that is so like us. It's so like me often, where we've actually done something wrong, and now what Uriah is trying to do is he's trying to cover up. He's trying to cover up. What David's trying to do is he's trying to cover up his dilemma, his mistake. And he calls Uriah and he says, hey, how's it going at the war? He says, no, it's going great. And he says, man, I'm so glad you're here. You're doing such a great job. I want to give you this gift. What a legend. What a great guy, giving him a gift and saying, hey, good job. You're fighting the battle well. The only problem with this is that David's motives are completely wrong. How many of us do the right things for the wrong reasons? We do the right things, but our motive is so wrong. Here, David, he calls Uriah, but actually the only reason he's giving him this gift is because of this. He says, but Uriah slept at the entrance to the palace with all his master's servants and did not go down to his house. David was told Uriah did not go home, so he asked Uriah, haven't you just come from a military campaign? Why didn't you go home? David's like, why? Freak. I mean, I'm giving you the gift. I want you to go and spend the night with your wife and just be with her and just take the night off from fighting. I'm the king. I'm giving you something that is good. But Uriah, wow. He obviously had something good going on inside of him. And he said, hey, you know what? I won't go home while my team is on the battlefield. Great man of character and integrity. Goes on and says, Uriah said to David, the ark in Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my commander Joab and my Lord's men are camped in the open country. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and make love to my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing. Man, our world craves men like this, who will not be swayed by the luxuries of the king, who will, even though they could have all of these pleasures, they choose, hey, I'm not going to do that because actually I want to be a man of integrity. And while my team is fighting out in the battlefield, I'll sleep in the servants' quarters. David, to this, you can just imagine inside what he's wrestling with. The worms that are growing and spreading, that he can't even see inside of him, but he is trying to solve his dilemma, his problem, the sin that he has committed, and it's getting harder and harder and harder to do. He goes on then and he says, then David said to him, stay here one more day, just one more day, and tomorrow I will send you back. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. As at David's invitation, he ate and drank with him, and David made him drunk. What a legend, right? We're going to figure out how we can cover up my mistake that I've done, all right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get Uriah drunk, smashed out of his face, and then I'm going to direct him, and I'm going to help him go to Bathsheba, all right, so that he can sleep with her, and then the problem will be solved. But in the evening, Uriah went out to sleep on his mat among his master's servants. He did not go home. Wow. I mean, he's even drunk. He's even drunk. There's no excuse now, right? Because that's a big one we use. But he's even drunk and he decides, you know what? I'm still not going to go to Bathsheba. In the morning, David then wrote a letter to Joab and he sent it with Uriah. In it he wrote, put Uriah out in front where the fighting is fiercest, then withdraw from him so he will be stuck down and die. Let's go back quickly to where David was just on the palace balcony, just glazed, just had one look at Bathsheba, and then had an option there to pursue it or just to go back in his room. Do you see what is happening on the inside of David? What he's trying to do that all of us, maybe we haven't committed adultery or maybe we haven't, done this, but at some point in our life, we have definitely failed. And we try and cover it up. We try and cover it up, act as if we're perfect people, which we're not. And the reality is we get to this point, where David now, what he's doing is he wants Uriah dead, just so he can cover up his mistake, his sin. He's the king. He's got authority. So that's what he does. How many of us have influence in maybe some areas of our life? And because of our moral failures, we're also doing the same thing. We're holding our power in order to actually cover up the wrongdoings that have happened in our life, that we've chosen intentionally. Yeah, David actually, he makes a decree to actually put Uriah at the front line of the battle. So in the morning, so while Joab had the city under siege, he put Uriah at a place where he knew the strongest defenders were. Wow, isn't this is pretty crazy for me as well, because David's mistake now has such influence that even Joab has to go along, all right, and actually commit sin and actually do something that I'm sure inside of him would have just ripped him to pieces. I mean, this is his team. These are his guys who are fighting the battle. And yeah, he has to listen to the king and take his degree and say, hey, Uriah, you need to be up front. When the men of the city came out and fought against Joab, some of the men in David's army fell. Moreover, Uriah the Hittite died. Wow. Just from when David was at the wrong place, because he actually should have just been on the battlefield, to the point where actually David kills and murders actually one of his friends so that he can cover up the shame and the guilt and the worms that are breeding up on the inside. When Uriah's wife heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. And that maybe that gives me a sense that, she was not pleased what happened. She mourned for her husband's death. And then it goes on and it says, after the time of mourning was over, David had her brought to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. Right there, David's won, right? Thank you, Jesus. It's covered up. I've done it. I've won the battle. I fought hard. I've done everything I can, and eventually, even to the point where I've killed someone, and now, wow, guess what? Bathsheba's my wife, and no one's going to know. But the reality is, when the worms are on the veranda or the patio, everyone sees it except David. The walls talk. Everyone in the kingdom knew what had happened. Everyone knew what David had done. And at this point, it even says, but the thing David had done displeased the Lord. And I want us to sit there quickly. Displeased the Lord. Because, what David had done, God did not agree with. This displeased God. He was not happy for what David was trying to cover up the whole time. And the reason I think that God was displeased is because actually God has so much more for David. God has so much more for each one of our lives. When we keep trying to cover up and cover up, He's got so much more for us. Why wouldn't He be displeased? Because the thing about this is it just breeds guilt and shame, bitterness, and on the inside we start dying. Happy painted faces. What happens next is that God actually gets Nathan, who was a prophet, to actually go and speak to David. And he goes to David and he actually makes up a story. He says, hey, David, there was a rich man and there was a poor man. And the rich man had heaps of sheep and cattle, and the poor man only had one little lamb. And they treated that lamb with like a family member. That poor man nurtured that lamb, gave him as much milk as that lamb needed, water, and he was just like one of their closest pets. And as Nathan is communicating this fictitious story to David, he says, but then a traveler came along. A traveler was just coming along, and as he came along, the rich man decided, hey, we need to feed this guy, but guess what? I'm not going to give any of my sheep or my cattle, but I'm going to go and take the one lamb from that poor man, and then I'm going to give that to the traveler. So he did. He took that and he gave it to the traveler. And as David's listening to the story, he is furious. He is angry. He says to Nathan, man, that person should suffer the consequences like 4 times what that person has done. And then Nathan says this to him. He said, then Nathan said to David, you are the man. You are that man. You are that rich man. How often have we maybe actually been pointing fingers at someone else or got so angry at someone else and their moral failures, but actually we're doing the exact same? There's stuff happening inside of our lives. Nathan then, after he does this, he says, then David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. And this is probably one of the best realizations that David had. Because for the first time, David actually, instead of, trying to, hey, I looked at Bathsheba, trying to cover up, what can I do to get Uriah to come back? At the first time, he accepted and he realized that he had made a big mistake. He accepted responsibility and he actually said, you know what? I have sinned against the Lord. And why against the Lord? Because God had so much more for David. The unfortunate thing about this is that we all know, and it doesn't matter if you're a Christian or if you're not a Christian, if you're a fully devoted follower of Jesus or if you're not a fully devoted follower of Jesus, but we all know that sin has consequences. It has consequences. It destroys. It breaks up. It separates. And for this, David would pay. If we go through the rest of the story of David's journey, we see that, man, he had to battle some crazy consequences just because of that small little thing that maybe he could have navigated in a different direction. Maybe he could have taken a different off-ramp, but he kept feeding into that. The ending of this is Nathan replies then, as David accepts responsibility and he says, hey, the Lord has done what? Can we all read this together? The Lord has done what? Taken away your sin, you are not going to die. Don't miss this, because throughout the whole series, I want us to understand that God, all right, is constant. God does not change. He is the same today as he is the same tomorrow. No matter what we do, all right, it doesn't change the way God and how he sees us and the way he values us. Not at all. He's displeased, in David and what David has done, but it will never change the way God sees us, the way he loves us, the way he will recklessly pursue us so that we can be in relationship with him. That's the God who he is. He can't change. God is love. And this actually is so interesting because David's sin was actually qualifying him for God's grace. It was interesting. Yesterday, I went home and I was mowing the lawn. And as I was mowing the lawn, once I was done, I was sweeping my veranda. And as I was sweeping my veranda, guess what I saw? Huh? I've never seen them there before. When did they get there? I saw some worms on my veranda. You see, the reality is that it doesn't matter what we've done, we all fall short of the glory of God. Each and every one of us who are sitting in this community today fall short of what God's got in store for us. We can't measure up. There is nothing we can do to measure up to God's grace and His love for us. The only thing we can do is what David did when he surrenders and he accepts responsibility and he says, hey, I've sinned and God, please help me. Please help me. I can't do this by myself. The reason we follow Jesus here is because we believe that God does take away our sin. Unfortunately, He doesn't take away the consequences, but He takes away our sin. He takes away the guilt, the shame. And yeah, even in this story, David could still go and be a king. No matter what you've done, no matter how big your moral failure is, no matter how big you've messed up, no matter how badly you've hurt someone, no matter how badly the worms are breeding on the inside, no matter how bad your motives are, God's grace is sufficient for you. And He actually needs that. He needs that almost so He can actually insert His grace, His love, and His purpose for our lives. Next week, we're going to go on. And I want us to look at next week, we're going to look at actually, hey, so what happens next with David here? Because obviously he had wrestled with all this stuff in his life. He had made unwise choices. Eventually he surrenders and he says, God, I'm accepting your love. I see that you pursue me. And I'm accepting your love. I'm accepting responsibility of what I've done. And now what? What do I do? How do I go on from here? So that's what we're going to do next week. We're going to invite the worship team to come up. They're going to sing this song, the new song that we just sang today. And what I want us to do is I want us to just listen to the lyrics. You can actually just stay seated. Just close your eyes. And actually, I want us to just listen to the lyrics. And actually, you know, whatever may be going on in our lives today, maybe today, whatever, you know, that thing that has just been maybe echoing in your mind today, I want you to just actually just surrender it and say, hey, God, today, no matter what I've been through, no matter what I'm going through, no matter what I'm doing, no matter my motives, no matter whatever, God, today, I just want to cry out to you and I just want to say, hey, God, I surrender. Just please help me. And I believe, and we believe as a community, yeah, God steps into that. Because He can't step into a closed heart, into a heart that is just can't even see that the worms are there. So let's just bow our heads. And as they sing, let's just say a prayer to God for ourselves.